Why hello there and welcome back to another Socket Sanctuary episode. As some of you may know, AMD sells AM1 quad-core processors incredibly cheaply. Anywhere from $30 for the lowest end to around $50 for the highest end Athlon APUs. So, that's a great deal, some of you may say. Well, hold on there. Before you go out and make a build out of it, let's test it to see if it's worthwhile to game on. And we'll also see what it's actually pretty good at. Then we'll take a look at what its base performance stats are, we'll throw a massive GPU on it to see how badly it bottlenecks or how well it actually performs. So, the first thing I did was I went out and bought an AMD 5350, which is their high-end 2.05 GHz quad-core Athlon APU. The APU has a graphics processing chip that has 127 stream processors running at 600 MHz. I paired the APU with an ASRock motherboard. Oh, by the way, all of the parts are in a PC part picker list, link down below, so check out the prices there. After I got that, I got a 7200 RPM 250GB hard drive with 4GB of DDR3 and an EVGA power supply. I decided I wanted a nice Cooler Master case that could fit the full-size graphics card that I wanted. However, you can pick up a Rosewell case for around $15 that would fit all of these parts. All total, I spent around $190 for my particular build. However, if you want to go with the PC part picker build, it should cost you just shy of $150, which puts the price a little bit higher than our Core 2 quad build from the previous PC build episode. So let's see if the actual performance is anywhere near that level. If you want Windows, you'll have to tack on another $80 to $100 to the build costs. Yes, I know you can get a gray market version of Windows for around $25, but it does technically violate the end user license agreement, so you can't be 100% certain that Microsoft won't give you issues about it. However, Linux and SteamOS are always an option for a free operating system. However, that does greatly limit the amount of games and applications that you can use. Anyhow, for my setup, I loaded a trial of Windows and threw on some games to see how they performed. The games that we will be benching are Skyrim, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Team Fortress 2, Rocket League, FTL, and BattleBlock Theater. The goal was to get them running at an average of 30 FPS or more, which was actually challenging in some cases. Alright, enough talk. Let's see how this system performs. On Counter-Strike Global Offensive, I had to lower the settings to 720p at a high setting before I could get the game at a playable frame rate. At these settings, I did, however, manage to pull an average of 41 frames per second with a 61 FPS max and dropping down to 16 during the more stressful moments. It's not really all that impressive when you consider CSGO is an incredibly easy to run game. In Rocket League, we had to drop the resolution to 720p and lower the settings to the minimum. And even so, the performance was incredibly lackluster considering how awful the game looked. With a 55 FPS average, a 69 max, and a 24 frame per second minimum, it at least gets a decent frame rate, despite the fact the game looks like ass. Skyrim is a relatively easy game to run. However, in order to get it at a playable frame rate, we had to set the resolution to 720p again and lower the settings to the lowest possible graphics. Even with everything set down that low, it only managed to get a 30 FPS average, with it only ever getting to 37 FPS when staring at the ground, and the frame rate dropped to 12 FPS when overlooking a nice vista. It's clear that both the CPU and graphics chip are struggling in the more open world type games. TF2 is an easy game to run, however I had to drop the settings again to low at 720p. And yet again, the performance just wasn't there. With an average of only 32 and a minimum of 12 FPS, I was very disappointed, as TF2 needs a decent frame rate in order to be competitive in the game, and I just couldn't achieve that with this system. Well, if this setup really isn't that good at 3D gaming, what can it do? This setup can play certain games quite well, like FTL and BattleBlock Theater and other 2D type games. FTL actually gets a buttery smooth 103 frames per second with no frame drops, and BattleBlock Theater gets a respectable and very playable average of 63 FPS, making it quite good for this arcade side-scroller 2D type game. All this benchmarking is well and good, however we're overlooking the main reason to buy a system like this. The Athlon APUs were never designed for gaming, and as Einstein said, we're judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree. The Athlon Series APUs are 25-watt low-powered units that are meant for those people who want something cheap and energy efficient to browse the internet on, watch Netflix, browse YouTube, or write a paper on. Although its graphics chip is great for HD video acceleration, it really lacks the grunt for modern games, which is perfectly fine for those people who aren't gamers. To drive home this point, I put my R9 390 into this system. It's all rather comical because the 390 pulls almost twice as much power as the rest of the system combined. Anyhow, I reran the benchmarks on CSGO, Skyrim, and Rocket League. The R9 390 can usually run these games quite well at max settings at 4K on my normal rig, so let's see what it can pull on this particular system. So, due to the really poor CPU, the recording software I decided to use crashed every single time I tried to record except for once. I did manage to get some CSGO footage at 1080p with it. On CSGO 1080p maximum settings, the CPU really held back the 390, only allowing it to reach an average frame rate of 45, with an average GPU usage of only 19%. On Skyrim, at 1080p ultra settings, the story was the same, with an average being held back to a pretty poor 27 FPS, with an average GPU usage of 21%. And again, on Rocket League, 1080p max settings, the frame rate only averaged 49 FPS with a 31% GPU usage. So there you go. Putting a really nice GPU in this rig to get better performance is like trying to put out a fire by complementing it. Although this PC build does have its uses, gaming really isn't one of them. Yes, it can, but no, you shouldn't.